It is not very welcoming not to introduce oneself, right? I shouldn't assume that you all know me, especially when I forgot my name tag. I'm Reverend Kathy Turicki, and I'm the interim minister here, joyfully serving you, even if I am perpetually behind. Today, I do have a reading that I'd like to share with you before I deliver my sermon. This is a story that is brought to us by Reverend Gretchen Haley. She's a Unitarian Universalist minister. I think she's retired. The story goes that once there was a wise woman traveling all through the mountains. One day, she found a precious stone in a stream. She was so happy and grateful it could change her life. The next day, she met a man traveling just like her through the mountains. He was hungry, and she was happy to share her food. But as she opened her bag, the man saw the stone, and he knew with this stone, he would be able to eat all his favorite foods. His mouth watered, imagining all the incredible flavors, all the ways his life would be filled with so much goodness. Instead of the food, he asked, "Can I have that stone?" The woman looked at him, "Of course." And just like that, it was his. The man was so happy. He ran quickly away, afraid she would change her mind. A few days later, however, the man appeared again, carrying the stone in his hand. "Take it back," he said. "Instead, I hope you can give me something even more precious than this precious stone." He said, "I hope you can give me whatever it is within you that made it so easy for you when I asked, you just gave it away." In this place, for this hour, Reverend Gretchen says, we are all trying to learn how it is when we are asked to trust, to love, to give of ourselves, to share our blessings, that we can say an easy and great yes. And also, we are here to remember we all carry with us a precious stone that is this great blessing, this gift. This is just ours, this gift that we long to offer the world, that in our giving, we will bless the world all the more. So ends the reading. Just not going to be able to do without that today, apparently. Pliny the Elder, a first-century Roman historian, tells us the story of a goldsmith who brought to the court of the Emperor Tiberius a plate which no one had ever seen before. The plate looked like it was made of the shiniest silver, yet it was lightweight and malleable. It was obviously some new kind of metal. The goldsmith claimed it was made from ordinary clay, but by a special process known only to him and the gods, he said. The court was impressed, but Tiberius worried. What would happen to his fortune in silver and gold if this new metal came into wide demand? In order to protect the value of his fortune, the emperor promptly had the goldsmith beheaded. Thus was the secret of how to produce aluminum lost to the world for nearly 2,000 years. Now, at least Tiberius guessed correctly that what the goldsmith had forged would remain rare until electricity came into being in the 19th century. And these days, aluminum is separated from bauxite, which is that mud, and then smelted. And it's the third most abundant resource on the planet. There are many stories about once rare resources made plentiful by innovation, demonstrating that scarcity is often contextual. I know since I've been on this planet and had an awareness, I've heard in every decade that we are running out of something: food, clean water, clean air, oil, gasoline, rainforests, green space, ozone, and polar ice caps. Overpopulation and overconsumption, the habits of first world countries, are said to be the culprits. And while these scarcities and their causes are real, we must remember that 3/4 of our planet is covered in resource-rich waters, and our planet is bathed in about 80 petawatts of carbon-free solar energy every day. We have plenty. That's about 1,000 times more than humanity needs in a year. So we have plenty. We just lack the efficient technologies to convert those vast resources into usable form for human consumption. Thinking of resources as scarce as opposed to limited is the basic assumption of supply and demand, which drives our market-based economy. And commentator David Brooks agrees. He says that in a recent commentary in the New York Times, he said human nature really leans much more toward generosity. But what's manifested in our values and practices is this idea of self-interest. He says, quote, "Classical economics is based on the idea that people relentlessly pursue their self-interest." So after living centuries living this not entirely true narrative, self-interest has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. A scarcity mentality pervades our policy making and leads to fear-based decision-making. But I think most unfortunately is that it can lead us to learned limitations and hinder our true capacity to be creative thinkers that perhaps might spring out of our generosity and our interest in the greater good. Buckminster Fuller was a visionary of the 20th century. And he had a very interesting little book called, Spaceship, what was it? Nope, he thought of the Earth as our terrestrial home, but moving through time and space. And he said that the sun was our energy source, which it really is. There's not very much that we don't touch or consume that is not nourished by the sun. So anyway, he was considered a bit eccentric. He was a transcendentalist. He was the great nephew of Margaret Fuller. And yes, he was the inventor of the geodesic dome. Now, he died in 1983, but he himself was on site in Orlando supervising the construction of the Epcot Dome. But he was also a humanitarian who believed that science and innovation would change the entire Earth and its population for the better. In the 1970s, Fuller proclaimed that using gasoline as an energy source was an economic as well as environmental failure. And he inspired the quote, "There is no energy crisis, only a crisis of ignorance." Well, that's a little harsh, but Fuller never accepted that there was a scarcity of anything on the earth, and he understood, though, that non-renewable resources were limited, but he said that oil was just a bridge, right? That in each era, in each time, as we move through space and time, that there would come along technology that would bridge that gap. But he felt like we weren't looking hard enough for it. Kind of sticking with the old ways. And so we might say that we're getting there, but we're still very dependent on oil. I mean, there's still fracking, right? That seems like a desperate measure to find oil and gas. And that kind of extraction is dangerous, and it lacks imagination. It's as though gas and coal and oil are for us what gold and silver were to Emperor Tiberius. We can't seem to loosen our grip on outmoded resources. Now, I'm not an anti-capitalist, but if we continue to live the way we do, as first world countries, we're 20% of the world population, we consume 80% of the resources of the world. And if every human being were to live as we live, here today in Boca Raton, it would require 4 Earths, the resources of 4 Earths to sustain. I believe that we need more abundance thinking in our economic policies that are grounded in values other than classic, neoclassic economics. We need more innovation. And isn't it ironic that right now, particularly in Florida, our education system seems to be turning out more cogs than inventors? Do you remember when Governor Scott said that a philosophy degree wasn't worth the paper it was printed on, that we needed mathematicians and scientists? Well, yes, we do, but a liberal education in the arts, history, social studies teaches children literature, teaches children how to think critically. That approach is being decimated. And culturally, I would hazard a guess that we are losing our imagination. So if, and it's a big if we want to turn our world around, reclaim our imagination and innovation, and have less negative impact on our biosphere, where do we start? That's way too big, right? We can't singly, or even as a congregation together, put a dent in that. But what if we could develop the quality of generosity exemplified by the woman in my reading? Perhaps generosity is the key because it is the antidote to a scarcity mentality. Just like charity, generosity begins at home, in our hearts and in our living. My colleague, Reverend Elizabeth Stevens, tells us that as individuals in community, In our personal lives, to live in a spirit of abundance means growing our gifts rather than compensating for a lack or what we see as a lack or what is seen as a lack by others. It means building on our own strengths rather than trying to eliminate our weaknesses. It means asking ourselves, what do I want to offer? Rather than what should I get in return? So I would say to Reverend Elizabeth that looking for a return on our giving is a consumerist mentality, and that just lands us right squarely back into the mode of scarcity thinking. The wisdom of generosity tells us that it doesn't matter how much we have or how much we give. If we have $10, we should consider parting with $1. It's a wisdom that says that it not only enlarges our generosity by loosening our grip on what we have, but giving that dollar builds our trust in the abundance that exists in our living. And it doesn't have to be material. In our Soul Matters packet, we learned that attention, giving somebody our deep, undivided attention, is an enormous gift. And you may have other talents that you can offer to the world. But if we are in that habit of giving, and be exemplars, who knows? Something might change. Parker Palmer confirms by saying, in the human world, abundance does not happen automatically. It's created when we have a sense, or we have the sense, to choose community, to come together to celebrate and share our common store. Whether the scarce resource is money, or love, or power, the true law of life, Palmer says, is that we generate more of whatever seems scarce by trusting its supply and passing it around. Authentic abundance is not found in secured stockpiles of food or cash or influence or affection, but in belonging to a community where we can give those goods to others who need them and receive from them, from others, when we are in need. Trusting the supply, the finite supply, and passing it around, what a challenge for our fearful selves. To practice this kind of generosity, my friends, requires faith. Our faith that there will be enough. Our faith that all will be well for all of us. Our faith that when we care and we share, there is usually enough for everyone in the room. So now let us embody our faith, our trust in the world, and in each other. Let us embody that abundance means having enough.